Week 12, lesson 4. Okay, now I'm hoping that this particular lesson ends up being more of review. You've definitely seen this before, and luckily if you print out the notes or you just sort of follow along on the video, you'll be able to copy a lot of these things down. So let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about. So you know these, the reciprocal identities, right? You can rewrite any trig function as its reciprocal or vice versa. But again, you can copy those down as needed. Also, these are like, you know that tangent is sine over cosine, so the reciprocal, right, this reciprocal right here is this reciprocal as well. All right, continuing, here's an example. All right, so for this problem, what it's asking you to do is to actually figure out what the sine of pi over 3 is. All right, and again, the cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So the sine at pi over 3 is rad 3 over 2. And if you simplify that complex fraction, you get 2 over rad 3. You do not have to rationalize anymore. Okay, so if you end up with a radical in the denominator, feel free to leave it. Okay, so you're going to be simplifying expressions with trig functions. You will know that you are all done if you can get one of two things. If you can get a single number, sorry, that should be a highlighter. If you can get a single number, or if you can get a single trig function, then you will have. All right, so let's give this a try. So tangent of x times the cotangent of x. You might recognize that those are reciprocals right now, but if not, let's do some substitutions. All right, so tangent is the sine of x over the cosine of x. Cotangent is the cosine of x over the sine of x. And if you cross cancel, or if you just multiply straight across from each other, either way, you end up with 1. All right, so you know that it's completely simplified because you were able to get it down to a single number. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Sine squared is the same thing as sine of x times the sine of x. Secant is 1 over the cosine of x, and cosecant is 1 over the sine of x. So now, when you cross cancel, right, this sign with this sign, the only thing that's left is sine of x over the cosine of x, which equals tangent of x. All right, and again, you know that you're done because you've gotten it down to a single trig function. Okay, so now the types of angles that you know, right, back from geometry, you definitely learned acute, and you definitely learned right, and you learned obtuse, and you learned straight. But the one you may not have ever learned is this last one called reflex. Okay, what that means is you have an angle that's greater than 180 degrees. Okay, an angle that's greater than 180 degrees is considered to be a reflex angle. Okay, so keeping that in mind, let's try this problem. Okay, so given that theta, and I'm sorry there's not a space there, anyway, is a reflex angle and that the cosine of the angle is 2/11, find the remaining 5 trig ratios. Okay, so if it's greater, so there's a couple things to think about. It's a reflex angle, so the angle is greater than 180 degrees. Okay, and so that means if I'm trying to draw it, it's either in this quadrant or this quadrant. Okay, but it also says that the cosine is positive, right? And hopefully you remember that cosine is positive in the 4th quadrant, but not in the 3rd. Okay, so let me draw that angle. So this is the angle, right? Because it's greater than 180. We're going to use this, though, just because I need a right triangle to be able to evaluate. So if it's cosine, that's the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. I can use the Pythagorean theorem to get this side, which is negative rad 117. It's unbelievably important that this is negative, all right, because we're in the 4th quadrant. right? In the fourth quadrant, just here's how I want you to sort of envision this. If this is a dot that you are trying to get to, right? If you're trying to actually name that coordinate, you would name it as 2 because of this, negative rad 117 because of this, right? But again, unbelievably important that you have that negative because it's going to affect so many trig ratios. So we want to find the remaining 5 trig ratios. So let's start with the sine. Okay, and sine, as you recall, is opposite over hypotenuse, so negative rad 117 over 11. Rad 117 actually does simplify a little bit, you guys. So it's negative 3 rad 13 over 11. All right, next, cosecant of theta, which is just the reciprocal of this one. So just literally flip it upside down, 11 over 3 rad 13. Let's do secant next. Mostly because cosine was given and those are reciprocals, so that's a really easy one to just flip over. All right, next let's do tangent, which is the opposite side over the adjacent side. Okay, which simplifies over 2. And then the last one, I'm going to need to give myself some room down here, the cotangent of the angle, which is just the reciprocal of the last one we figured out, so 2 over negative 3 rad 13.